The dust from the old pickup truck settled slowly as it drove away, leaving Maria Elena standing alone on the dirt road. She held her baby daughter Sophia close to her chest, feeling the little one's heartbeat against her own. The canvas bag slung over her shoulder contained everything they owned in the world. 3 changes of clothes, a few baby things, and her grandmother's wooden spoon wrapped carefully in a faded kitchen towel. The Silver Creek Ranch stretched out before them like something from a dream. Rolling hills covered in green grass went on for miles, and cattle dotted the landscape like brown and black specks. The main house sat on a small hill painted white with a wraparound porch that looked welcoming even from a distance. Behind it, several smaller buildings scattered across the property. Barns, storage sheds, and what looked like living quarters for the ranch workers. Maria took a deep breath and started walking toward the house. Her legs felt shaky after the long journey north, and little Sophia was getting fussy. The baby had been such a good traveler, hardly crying during the difficult trip. But now she was hungry and tired, and Maria knew she needed to find them a place to settle soon. The screen door of the main house opened before Maria reached the porch steps. A woman appeared, tall and lean, with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore simple clothes, a blue work shirt and dark pants, but something about the way she carried herself told Maria this was the ranch owner. "You must be Maria," the woman said, coming down the steps. Her voice was kind but tired, like someone who hadn't smiled much lately. "I'm Eleanor Hartwell. We spoke on the phone." Maria nodded, shifting Sophia to one arm so she could shake hands. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for giving me this chance." Eleanor's eyes went to the baby immediately. Sophia was looking around with wide, curious eyes, taking in all the new sights and sounds. A small smile crossed Eleanor's face, the first real warmth Maria had seen from her. "She's beautiful," Eleanor said softly. "How old?" 8 months, Maria replied. "She's very good. Won't cause any trouble in the kitchen." Eleanor waved a hand dismissively. "Children belong wherever their mothers are. Don't worry about that." She gestured toward the house. "Come on, let me show you around." They walked through the main house first. It was larger than any home Maria had ever been inside, with high ceilings and furniture that looked expensive but comfortable. Family photographs lined the mantel above a stone fireplace, and Maria caught glimpses of Eleanor with a man who must have been her husband. "The kitchen is through here," Eleanor said, leading them into a spacious room that made Maria's heart skip. It was a cook's dream, a large gas stove with 6 burners, 2 ovens, and a griddle, endless counter space and cabinets that reached almost to the ceiling. Windows on 2 walls let in plenty of natural light, and a sturdy wooden table sat in the center for food preparation. "This is perfect," Maria whispered, almost to herself. Eleanor heard her and nodded. "My husband designed it himself. Said if we were going to feed a dozen hungry ranch hands 3 times a day, we needed a kitchen that could handle the job." Her voice caught slightly on the word husband, and Maria understood. This was a widow's house now. "The previous cook left rather suddenly," Eleanor continued, regaining her composure. "Said ranch life wasn't for her. Left me scrambling to feed everyone. The men have been living on beans and burned bacon for 2 weeks." Maria shifted Sophia again, feeling the baby getting heavier in her arms. "What would you like me to cook? I know many dishes. Mexican food, American food, whatever the men prefer. Anything edible would be an improvement," Eleanor said with a slight smile. "Most of these cowboys aren't picky. They just want food that fills them up and doesn't poison them." They walked through the rest of the kitchen, Eleanor pointing out where supplies were kept and explaining the daily routine. Breakfast at 5 in the morning for the early shift, lunch at noon and dinner at 6. Coffee should always be ready, and there were usually a few men coming and going throughout the day who might need a quick meal. "Now let me show you where you'll be staying," Eleanor said, leading them outside. Behind the main house sat a small building that looked like it had been a storage shed converted into living quarters. It had 1 room with a bed, a small table, and a tiny bathroom. A window looked out toward the mountains in the distance. Maria tried to hide her disappointment. She had hoped for something larger, maybe 2 rooms so Sophia could have her own space, but it was clean and dry, and that was more than they'd had in weeks. "I know it's not much," Eleanor said, seeming to read her thoughts. "If you'd prefer, there are rooms in the main house. The upstairs has several bedrooms that aren't being used." Maria shook her head quickly. "This is fine. Better than fine. We don't need much space. Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue but didn't push. Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands. Now, are you ready to start? The men will be expecting dinner in a few hours. Walking back to the kitchen, Maria felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had cooked for large groups before, but never in a kitchen this well-equipped, and never with a baby to care for at the same time. Where should I put Sophia while I cook? She asked. Eleanor looked around the kitchen thoughtfully. What about over there in the corner? We could set up a little area for her. They found some clean blankets in a linen closet and made a soft spot on the floor near the windows. Sophia seemed content to sit and play with her few toys while Maria explored the kitchen and planned the evening meal. The pantry was well stocked with basics: flour, beans, rice, canned vegetables, and a good selection of spices. The cold storage had fresh meat, eggs, and milk. Maria began to relax as she realized she had everything needed to make a proper meal. She decided to start simple: beef stew with fresh biscuits and green beans, comfort food that would fill hungry bellies and maybe earn her some approval from the ranch hands. As she worked, Eleanor lingered in the kitchen longer than necessary. She helped Maria find pots and pans, showed her how the temperamental oven worked, and even sat on the floor for a few minutes playing with Sophia. She's very alert for 8 months, Eleanor observed, watching Sophia try to stack wooden blocks. She's been through a lot, Maria said quietly, not wanting to share too much too soon, but she's strong. Stronger than me sometimes. Eleanor glanced up at her with understanding eyes. Sometimes we find strength we didn't know we had, especially when we're protecting someone we love. The afternoon passed quickly. Maria found her rhythm in the kitchen, moving efficiently between tasks while keeping one eye on Sophia. The baby was fascinated by all the new sights and sounds, babbling happily from her corner. Around 5:30, the sound of boots on the porch announced the arrival of the ranch hands. Maria felt her stomach tighten with nerves. This was the real test. These men would decide whether she belonged here or not. Eleanor appeared at the kitchen door as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Don't worry, she said quietly to Maria. Just put the food out and let them serve themselves. They're not expecting fancy service. As the men filed through the kitchen, filling their plates and murmuring their thanks, Maria watched their faces carefully. She saw approval in their eyes as they tasted the stew, relief that they were finally getting a proper meal again. One older ranch hand paused by Sophia's corner. That's a pretty baby you got there, he said to Maria with a kind smile. Reminds me of my granddaughter. Maria felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. These were good men, she realized. Hardworking and decent, she could make a life here for herself and Sophia. Later, after the dishes were done and the kitchen cleaned, Maria sat in her small room nursing Sophia before bedtime. Through the thin walls, she could hear the gentle sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, the soft nickering of horses, and the low voices of men finishing their evening chores. For the first time in months, Maria felt something that might have been hope. They had found a place where they could belong, a place where Sophia could grow up safe and loved. As she rocked her daughter to sleep, Maria whispered a prayer of gratitude to whatever angels had guided them to Silver Creek Ranch. 3 weeks into her new life at Silver Creek Ranch, Maria had found her rhythm. Every morning at 4:30, she would wake to Sophia's gentle stirring and begin the day that had become as predictable as sunrise. The baby had adapted remarkably well to ranch life, seeming to thrive on the fresh air and open spaces. Maria's first task each morning was to get the coffee started. The ranch hands depended on that strong, dark brew to fuel them through their long days. While the coffee percolated, she would change and feed Sophia, then settle her in the makeshift nursery she had created in the corner of the kitchen. The nursery had grown more elaborate over the weeks. What started as blankets on the floor had become a cozy space with feed sacks sewn into soft cushions, a wooden crate turned into a toy box, and colorful dish towels hung as decorations. The ranch hands had quietly contributed to Sophia's comfort. Tom, the oldest cowboy, had whittled a set of wooden animals. Billy had brought a music box from town that played a gentle lullaby. Even gruff old Pete had shown up one morning with a hand-knitted blanket that he claimed his sister had made, though everyone suspected he had bought it himself. Sophia loved her kitchen corner. From there she could watch all the activity, listen to her mother's singing, and receive attention from anyone who passed through. She had become the unofficial ranch mascot, bringing smiles to weathered faces and adding a warmth to the place that had been missing since Eleanor's husband died. Maria's cooking had transformed the atmosphere of the entire ranch. The men who had grown accustomed to barely edible meals now looked forward to every sitting. She prepared hearty breakfasts of eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits with honey. Lunches might be thick sandwiches with homemade bread or hearty soups with cornbread. Dinners featured roasts, steaks, or her grandmother's enchilada recipe that had become a weekly favorite. But it was the small touches that really won them over. Fresh cookies appearing on the counter in the afternoon, hot coffee and warm bread waiting when they came in from cold morning chores. The way she remembered that Tom liked extra butter on his biscuits and that young Jake couldn't handle spicy food. Eleanor had begun spending more time in the kitchen than Maria expected from a ranch owner. At first, Maria thought she was checking up on her work, making sure the new cook was meeting expectations. But gradually, she realized Eleanor simply enjoyed the company. Every morning around 7, after the first wave of ranch hands had eaten and headed out to work, Eleanor would appear with her coffee cup. She would settle at the kitchen table with ranch paperwork or account books, working quietly while Maria prepared lunch and Sophia played nearby. "You don't have to work in here," Maria had said during the second week. "I know you have an office in the main house." Eleanor had looked up from her ledger, seeming almost embarrassed. "The kitchen gets such nice morning light, and it's warmer than the office." She paused, then added more honestly, "It's also less lonely." That admission had touched something in Maria's heart. She understood loneliness, the ache of missing someone who would never come home again. In Eleanor's case, it was a husband who had died in a terrible accident 6 months earlier. In Maria's case, it was the family she had left behind in Mexico, people she might never see again. As the days passed, their morning routine became comfortable and natural. Eleanor would help fold laundry while Maria kneaded bread. They would discuss the day's menu or share stories about their different lives. Eleanor talked about growing up on a smaller ranch in Wyoming, learning to ride before she could properly walk. Maria shared memories of her grandmother's kitchen in Guadalajara, where she had learned to cook traditional dishes that had been passed down through generations. Sophia had taken to Eleanor immediately, reaching for her with chubby arms whenever she entered the room. Eleanor, who claimed she wasn't good with children, had a natural way with the baby. She would make funny faces that sent Sophia into giggles, or sing old lullabies in a surprisingly sweet voice. "You're very good with her," Maria observed one morning, watching Eleanor help Sophia stack wooden blocks. "I had some practice once," Eleanor replied quietly, then changed the subject. Maria didn't push for details, but she sensed there was a story there. Perhaps Eleanor had lost more than just a husband. The thought made her heart ache for this kind woman who had given them a safe place to land. The other significant change in Maria's routine came in the evenings. After dinner was served and the kitchen cleaned, she would take Sophia outside for some fresh air before bedtime. The summer evenings in Montana were long and beautiful, with the sun setting late behind the mountains in a blaze of orange and pink. She had discovered a perfect spot on the back porch of the main house, where a wooden rocking chair sat overlooking the pastures. Eleanor had told her to make herself comfortable anywhere on the property. So Maria had begun spending these quiet evening hours there, rocking Sophia to sleep while watching the ranch settle down for the night. The rocking chair had clearly belonged to Eleanor's husband. It was positioned to have the best view of the ranch operations, and the wood was worn smooth from years of use. But Eleanor had never asked her to find somewhere else to sit. Instead, she had begun joining them, bringing her own chair from inside and setting it nearby. They didn't talk much during these evening sessions. Sophia would nurse and then drift off to sleep in Maria's arms while Maria hummed the lullabies her own mother had sung to her. Eleanor would sit quietly, sometimes reading a book or working on mending, but often just watching the sky change colors as night approached. "My husband used to sit in that chair every evening," Eleanor mentioned one night as they watched fireflies begin to dance in the grass. "He said it was the best part of his day, watching everything peaceful and knowing all the work was done." Maria looked down at the worn armrests, suddenly feeling like she was intruding on sacred ground. "I can find somewhere else to sit." "No," Eleanor said quickly. He would have liked seeing it used this way. He always said a ranch was meant to be full of life. She was quiet for a moment. He would have loved Sophia. He had such a way with children. The sadness in Eleanor's voice made Maria's chest tight. How long were you married? 15 years. We met when I was 22 and he was 25. He was working on my father's ranch in Wyoming, and I thought he was the most handsome cowboy I'd ever seen. Eleanor smiled at the memory. Took him 3 months to work up the courage to ask me to a dance. He sounds like a good man. The best. Patient and kind and funny. He could make me laugh even on the worst days. Eleanor's voice grew softer. We tried for years to have children. Had a son once, but lost him when he was just 3 days old. After that, we poured all our love into this ranch instead. Maria felt tears prick her eyes. No wonder Eleanor was so natural with Sophia, and no wonder she seemed so lonely in that big house. I'm sorry, it was a long time ago. But holding Sophia sometimes, it reminds me of what might have been. They sat in comfortable silence after that, both women lost in their own thoughts while Sophia slept peacefully in Maria's arms. The night sounds of the ranch surrounded them. Cattle moving slowly through the pastures, horses nickering softly in the corral, and the distant howl of a coyote calling to its pack. This had become Maria's favorite time of day. After the rush of cooking and serving and cleaning, these quiet moments felt like a gift. Sophia was content and safe. They had a roof over their heads and food on the table, and slowly, carefully, she was building something that felt like friendship with Eleanor. She thought about the life she had left behind, the dangers she had fled with her baby daughter. There had been nights when she wasn't sure they would survive, when finding food and shelter seemed impossible. Now Sophia was growing chubby and happy, babbling more each day and trying to pull herself up to standing. This was the life Maria had dreamed of for her daughter, safe and peaceful, surrounded by good people who cared about them. As the last light faded from the sky, Maria would carry the sleeping Sophia inside to their small room behind the kitchen. Eleanor would bid them good night and head to the main house while Maria settled Sophia in the wooden crib that Tom had built for them. The baby would sleep soundly through the night, lulled by the gentle sounds of the ranch and the security of knowing she was loved and protected. Before going to sleep herself, Maria would stand at the small window of their room, looking out at the vast Montana sky filled with more stars than she had ever seen. She would whisper a prayer of gratitude for this place, these people, and the chance to build a new life for herself and Sophia. Tomorrow would bring another day of cooking and caring, and slowly, carefully putting down roots in this unexpected home they had found at Silver Creek Ranch. The fever started on a Tuesday evening in late August. Sophia had been fussy during dinner service, clinging to Maria's leg and refusing to play with her usual toys. At first, Maria thought it was just teething troubles. The baby had been drooling more than usual and trying to chew on everything she could reach. But when Maria picked Sophia up after serving the last of the ranch hands, she felt the unmistakable heat radiating from the small body. Sophia's cheeks were flushed bright red, and her normally bright eyes looked glassy and unfocused. "Oh, little one," Maria whispered, pressing her lips to Sophia's forehead. The baby was burning up with fever, her tiny body trembling despite the warm evening air. Maria carried Sophia to their small room, her mind racing with worry. She had seen children get sick like this before, and she knew how quickly a baby could go from fine to dangerously ill. In the small town where she grew up, families sometimes lost little ones to fevers that came on fast and couldn't be controlled. She tried all the remedies her grandmother had taught her. Cool cloths on Sophia's forehead, trying to get her to drink small sips of water, rocking her gently while singing soft lullabies. But as the hours passed, Sophia only got worse. Her breathing became quick and shallow, and she started making small whimpering sounds that broke Maria's heart. By 10 o'clock, Maria was fighting panic. Sophia's fever felt even higher, and the baby was barely responding when Maria tried to wake her. She had never felt so alone and helpless in her life. In her hometown, there had always been neighbors to help, older women who knew about caring for sick children. Here, she was isolated with no car, no phone, and no idea where to find medical help. Maria was pacing the small room, Sophia limp in her arms, when she heard a soft knock on the door. She opened it to find Eleanor standing there in her nightgown and robe holding a small leather bag. "I heard the baby crying," Eleanor said quietly. "Is everything all right?" "She's so sick," Maria said, her voice breaking. "The fever is very high and I don't know what to do. I don't have money for a doctor and I don't even know where to find one. Eleanor stepped into the room immediately, setting her bag on the small table. "Let me see her." Maria handed Sophia over, watching anxiously as Eleanor examined the baby with gentle, experienced hands. She checked Sophia's ears, looked in her throat, and listened to her breathing. "It looks like an ear infection," Eleanor said finally. "Babies get them sometimes when they're teething. The fever is high, but we can bring it down." She opened her leather bag and pulled out several small bottles. "I have medicine that will help." "You have medicine?" Maria asked, surprised. Eleanor was already measuring liquid from one of the bottles into a small spoon. "When you live this far from town, you learn to keep medical supplies on hand. Animals and people both." She held the spoon to Sophia's lips. "Come on, little one. This will make you feel better." Sophia was too listless to fight the medicine, swallowing it without protest. Eleanor then dampened a cloth with cool water and began gently wiping the baby's face and arms. "The fever should start coming down in about an hour," Eleanor said. But we need to watch her closely tonight. Babies can get worse quickly if we're not careful." "We?" Maria repeated. "I'm not going anywhere," Eleanor said firmly. "You shouldn't handle this alone." What followed was the longest night of Maria's life, but also one that showed her a side of Eleanor she had never seen before. The ranch owner settled into the room's only chair as if she belonged there, taking turns with Maria to hold Sophia, give her medicine, and monitor her fever. As the hours passed and the medicine began to work, Sophia's fever slowly broke. Her breathing became easier and she began to respond when they spoke to her. Around 3 in the morning, she even managed a small smile when Eleanor made funny faces at her. "I think she's going to be fine," Eleanor said softly, smoothing the baby's dark hair. "The fever is almost gone." Maria felt tears of relief stream down her face. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You would have figured it out," Eleanor said. "Mothers always do, but you don't have to do everything alone." As Sophia finally settled into peaceful sleep, the two women found themselves talking quietly in the dimly lit room. The crisis had broken down the careful politeness they usually maintained, leaving them speaking more honestly than they ever had before. "You're very good with children," Maria observed, watching Eleanor gently stroke Sophia's hand. "You said you had practice once?" Eleanor was quiet for so long that Maria thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "My husband and I had a son, David. He lived for 3 days." Maria's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry. It was 7 years ago now. He was born too early, too small. We knew from the beginning that," Eleanor's voice caught. "But for 3 days we got to hold him and love him and pretend everything would be all right. That must have been so hard." Eleanor nodded, wiping her eyes. "After that, I thought I'd never want to be around babies again. It hurt too much. But Sophia," she looked down at the sleeping child, "she reminds me that loving someone is worth the risk of losing them." Maria felt a deep connection to this woman who had shown her such kindness. "I understand about loving and losing. Sophia's father. He wasn't a good man. He hurt us both even when Sophia was still tiny. That's why we left. I was so afraid he would find us and take her away from me." Eleanor looked up sharply. "He was violent?" "Very violent. Especially when he drank, which was most of the time. I stayed as long as I could, hoping he would change. But when he started getting angry at Sophia for crying," Maria's voice trailed off, "I knew we had to leave before he seriously hurt one of us." "How did you get here?" Maria told her story then, the words pouring out in the quiet darkness. The careful planning, saving every penny she could hide. The terrifying journey north with a baby, never knowing if they would be caught or sent back. The weeks of traveling from place to place, sleeping in bus stations and cheap motels, always looking over her shoulder. "I saw your advertisement in a newspaper someone had left behind at a diner," Maria explained. "Ranch cook needed, room and board provided, experience with large meals required." It seemed like a sign from God. "I'm glad you called," Eleanor said simply. "This place has been too quiet since my husband died. You and Sophia have brought life back to it." As dawn began to filter through the small window, Sophia stirred and opened her eyes. Her fever was completely gone and she looked around with her usual bright curiosity. When she saw Eleanor, she reached out with both arms, babbling happily. "I think someone is feeling much better," Eleanor said, lifting Sophia and receiving a drooly baby kiss on her cheek. Maria watched the interaction with wonder. In one night, something had shifted between all three of them. Eleanor was no longer just the kind employer who had given them a chance. She was a woman who had sat up all night caring for a sick child that wasn't even her own, sharing her deepest pain and offering comfort without expecting anything in return. "Would you like some coffee?" Maria asked as Sophia began to fuss for her morning feeding. "I should start breakfast for the men soon." "Let me make the coffee," Eleanor said. "You take care of Sophia. The ranch hands can wait a little longer for their breakfast today." As Eleanor headed toward the kitchen, Maria settled into the rocking chair with her daughter. Sophia nursed hungrily, already back to her normal self after the frightening night. But Maria knew that something fundamental had changed in their small world. For the first time since arriving at Silver Creek Ranch, she felt like she truly belonged there. Not just as an employee doing a job, but as someone who mattered, someone whose troubles were worth sharing, whose child was worth protecting, whose presence added value to the lives around her. When Eleanor returned with coffee for both of them, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching Sophia play with her toes and babble at the morning sunlight streaming through the window. The crisis was over, but the connection they had forged in those long, dark hours remained. "Maria," Eleanor said quietly, "I want you to know that you and Sophia always have a place here. No matter what happens, this is your home now." Maria felt tears well up again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than fear. "Thank you. For everything. For the medicine. For staying up with us, for caring about her like she was your own." "She feels like my own," Eleanor admitted softly. "Both of you do." Later that morning, when the ranch hands came in for their slightly delayed breakfast, they immediately noticed that something had changed. Sophia was her usual cheerful self, flirting with anyone who would pay attention to her. But there was a new ease between Maria and Eleanor, a natural partnership that hadn't been there before. "Little one was sick last night," Tom observed, noticing the baby's slightly wan appearance. "Just a fever," Maria replied, serving him his usual large portion of eggs and bacon, but Eleanor helped take care of her. "Stayed up all night with us," the old cowboy nodded approvingly. "Good to have someone who knows about doctoring when you need them." Ranch life can be hard on little ones. As the day went on, Maria found herself looking at Eleanor differently, not as the boss who employed her, but as a friend who had proven herself trustworthy in the most important way possible, someone who would show up in the middle of the night when things got scary. September arrived with crisp mornings that hinted at the coming autumn. The leaves on the cottonwood trees near the creek were starting to turn yellow, and the ranch hands had begun talking about preparing for winter. Maria found herself looking forward to experiencing her first Montana winter, something that would have terrified her just months ago. Now, with Sophia thriving and their place at the ranch secure, the changing seasons felt like a natural progression rather than a threat. The rhythm of their days had evolved into something comfortable and natural. Eleanor no longer made excuses for spending time in the kitchen. She would arrive each morning with her coffee cup and paperwork, settling at the kitchen table as if it were her office. Maria had begun setting out a plate of whatever pastry she was baking that day, and Eleanor would nibble on fresh cinnamon rolls or apple turnovers while working on ranch accounts. Sophia had become the unofficial mascot of Silver Creek Ranch. At 10 months old, she was pulling herself up to standing and cruising along furniture, babbling constantly in a mixture of sounds that sometimes resembled words. The ranch hands had taken to stopping by the kitchen throughout the day, not just for coffee and Maria's cooking, but to check on Sophia's latest accomplishments. "That little girl is going to be walking before Halloween," Tom predicted one morning, watching Sophia pull herself up using a kitchen chair. Mark my words. Sophia had indeed become more mobile and curious about everything around her. Maria had baby-proofed the kitchen as much as possible, but Sophia still managed to find new dangers to explore every day. Eleanor had noticed Maria's constant vigilance and quietly began helping to watch the baby during busy meal preparations. "You don't need to do that," Maria had protested the first time Eleanor scooped up Sophia, just as she was about to grab a hot pot handle. "I enjoy it," Eleanor replied simply. "Besides, cooking is hard enough without worrying about a baby getting into trouble." What started as practical help gradually became something more. Eleanor would play with Sophia while Maria cooked, singing old songs or making up stories. She had even brought down some children's books from the main house, claiming they had belonged to her late husband as a boy. These were just gathering dust upstairs, she said, settling Sophia on her lap to look at picture books. Children's books should be read, not stored away. Maria watched these interactions with growing warmth. Eleanor was patient and gentle with Sophia, never seeming annoyed when the baby wanted to grab the pages or tried to eat the corners of the books. She had a natural way of entertaining Sophia that kept the baby happy and occupied while Maria worked. The evenings continued to be their special time. As the weather grew cooler, Eleanor had brought out warm blankets for their porch-sitting sessions. They would bundle up and watch the sunset while Sophia nursed and dozed in Maria's arms. These conversations had deepened over the weeks, moving beyond polite exchanges to real friendship. Eleanor had begun teaching Maria to read English more fluently. They would work through newspapers and simple books together, Eleanor patiently explaining grammar and pronunciation, while Maria struggled with the complexities of her second language. "Your English is already very good," Eleanor assured her during one of their reading sessions. "Much better than my Spanish? I learned some in school, but not enough," Maria replied, sounding out a difficult word. "I want Sophia to speak both languages perfectly." "She will," Eleanor said confidently. "Children pick up languages so easily. She's already babbling in what sounds like Spanish and English mixed together." In return, Maria had begun teaching Eleanor simple Spanish words and phrases. Eleanor was a quick learner, picking up kitchen vocabulary and basic conversation. She seemed particularly determined to master the lullabies Maria sang to Sophia. "I want to be able to sing to her in both languages," Eleanor explained when Maria found her practicing pronunciation under her breath. The ranch hands had noticed the growing closeness between the two women, but they seemed to approve rather than gossip. Maria's cooking had made everyone's life better, and Sophia's presence had brought a warmth to the ranch that had been missing since Eleanor's husband died. The men could see that Eleanor was happier, more like her old self, and they appreciated having their boss back to her normal cheerful disposition. "Good to see the missus smiling again," Pete had commented to Tom one day when they thought Maria couldn't hear. "That baby and her mama have been good medicine for this place." As October approached, Maria realized how much her world had expanded. When she first arrived at Silver Creek Ranch, her universe consisted of Sophia, the kitchen, and their small room. Now she felt connected to the entire ranch community. She knew everyone's preferences and dietary restrictions, their personalities and quirks. More importantly, she felt valued and appreciated in a way she had never experienced before. Eleanor had begun including Maria in ranch business discussions, asking her opinion about hiring additional help for the winter months or whether they should invest in a new stove for the kitchen. These conversations made Maria feel like a partner rather than just an employee. "What do you think about getting a few more chickens before winter?" Eleanor asked one morning while reviewing supply lists. "Fresh eggs are always popular with the men." "That would be wonderful," Maria replied, grateful to be consulted. "And maybe we could get some herbs started in the window garden? Fresh rosemary and thyme would improve the winter cooking." Eleanor made notes in her ledger. "Good idea. You know much more about cooking than I do. I want to make sure you have everything you need to do your job well." These practical discussions often led to more personal conversations. Eleanor shared stories about learning to run the ranch after her husband's death, the challenges of managing both the business and emotional sides of the operation. Maria talked about her dreams for Sophia's future, her hopes that her daughter would have opportunities she never had. "I want her to go to school, maybe even college someday," Maria said one evening while Sophia played with blocks at their feet. "I want her to have choices about what kind of life she wants." "She will," Eleanor said firmly. "Smart, determined women like you always find a way to give their children better futures." The compliment warmed Maria's heart. Eleanor had a way of expressing confidence in her that made Maria feel capable of anything. Growing up, no one had ever suggested that a poor girl from Mexico might have big dreams for her daughter. Eleanor's faith in their possibilities felt like a gift. As the days grew shorter and the morning air carried the bite of coming winter, Maria found herself treasuring these quiet evening conversations even more. Sophia would fall asleep in her arms while she and Eleanor talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams under the wide Montana sky. "I've been thinking," Eleanor said one evening as they watched the first frost sparkle on the grass. "This winter is going to be long and cold. Your little room might not be warm enough for Sophia," Maria felt a flutter of worry. I can get more blankets or maybe a small heater. I was thinking, Eleanor continued gently. There are several rooms upstairs in the main house that stay much warmer. They have better insulation and heating. You and Sophia might be more comfortable there. Maria hesitated. The offer was generous, but it would change the dynamic between them. Living in the main house would blur the lines between employer and employee even further. I don't want to intrude on your privacy, Maria said carefully. Eleanor looked at her with surprise. You wouldn't be intruding. The house is too big for one person anyway, and Sophia could have her own room, space to play when the weather keeps everyone inside. The idea of Sophia having her own room was tempting. The baby was outgrowing their small quarters, and winter would mean being cooped up inside for months. But Maria also sensed that this invitation represented something bigger than just practical arrangements. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, Eleanor replied. But don't feel like you have to stay in that tiny room just because that's where you started. Things change. People's needs change. Later that night, as Maria settled Sophia in her crib, she thought about Eleanor's offer. The ranch owner was right that things had changed since her arrival. What had started as a job had become something deeper. The careful distance she had maintained was gradually dissolving into genuine friendship and mutual care. Sophia babbled sleepily, reaching for the wooden horse Tom had carved for her. Maria watched her daughter's content expression and made her decision. Sophia deserved the best life Maria could provide for her. If that meant accepting Eleanor's generous offer and living in the main house, then that's what she would do. The next morning, while Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with her coffee and paperwork, Maria approached the subject again. About your offer, she began, wiping her hands on her apron. If you're sure we wouldn't be in the way, Sophia and I would like to accept. Eleanor's face lit up with genuine pleasure. Wonderful. We can start moving your things this weekend. I'll show you the rooms upstairs so you can choose which ones you prefer. As Maria returned to her cooking preparations, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about this new chapter. Living in the main house would bring them even closer to Eleanor, would make their relationship even more complex and meaningful. But looking at Sophia, the blizzard hit Silver Creek Ranch on a Wednesday in early December, arriving with a fury that caught everyone off guard. Maria woke to the sound of wind howling around the main house like a living thing, rattling windows and doors with an intensity she had never experienced. When she looked outside, she could barely see the barn through the wall of swirling white. Sophia, now 11 months old and taking her first tentative steps, seemed fascinated by the storm. She pressed her face against the window in her new upstairs bedroom, babbling excitedly at the snow while Maria watched with growing concern. The weather reports on Eleanor's radio spoke of temperatures dropping well below zero and snow accumulating by the foot. It's going to be a long few days, Eleanor said grimly as they met in the kitchen that morning. The roads are already impassable, and the weather service is predicting this storm will last at least through Friday. Maria looked out at the ranch buildings, barely visible through the driving snow. What about the men? Can they get to the bunkhouse? They're all there already, thank goodness. Tom made sure everyone was accounted for before the worst of it hit. But we're going to need to keep them fed and warm until this passes. What followed were 3 of the most challenging and revealing days of Maria's life. With the storm raging outside, the main house became the heart of ranch operations. The men ventured out only when absolutely necessary to care for the animals, returning to the kitchen wind-burned and half-frozen. Maria found herself cooking almost constantly, preparing hot meals and coffee to warm them up, plus extra food to send back to the bunkhouse. Eleanor worked alongside her without being asked, helping with food preparation and serving while also managing ranch business from the kitchen table. Her radio crackled constantly with weather updates and check-ins from neighboring ranches. The isolation of the storm had created an atmosphere of shared purpose and mutual dependence. Sophia adapted to the unusual situation with the resilience that never ceased to amaze Maria. With more people around than usual, she received constant attention and entertainment. The ranch hands took turns playing with her while waiting for their meals, teaching her to stack blocks or clap her hands. She had become their shared mascot, bringing smiles to tired faces and providing a welcome distraction from the storm raging outside. On Thursday evening, young Jake stumbled into the kitchen with blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. He had been checking on the horses when a piece of loose barn roofing, torn free by the wind, had struck him. "It looks worse than it is," he insisted, but Eleanor was already gathering medical supplies. Maria found herself assisting Eleanor in cleaning and bandaging the wound, holding Jake steady while Eleanor worked with calm efficiency. She had never seen this side of Eleanor before, the ranch owner who could take charge in a crisis and provide medical care when needed. "You're going to have a good scar to impress the ladies," Eleanor told Jake with a gentle smile as she finished the bandaging. "But you'll live." Later that night, after the last of the men had been fed and sent back to the bunkhouse, Maria and Eleanor sat in the living room by the fireplace. Sophia was fast asleep upstairs, exhausted by all the excitement of the day. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the house felt warm and secure. "You were amazing today," Maria said, watching Eleanor poke at the fire. "The way you handled Jake's injury, kept everyone organized and fed. I can see why your husband trusted you to help run this place." Eleanor settled back in her chair with a tired sigh. "Frank always said I was tougher than I looked. I think he was preparing me for this, even though neither of us knew it at the time." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind and the crackling of the fire. Maria found herself studying Eleanor's profile in the firelight, noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The strength in her jawline, the gentle curve of her neck, the way her hair had escaped its usual practical bun to frame her face in soft waves. "Maria?" Eleanor said softly, breaking into her thoughts. "I want you to know how much it has meant to me, having you and Sophia here, especially during times like this. I don't think I could have managed alone." "You could have managed anything," Maria replied honestly. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." Eleanor turned to look at her then, and something passed between them in the firelight. A recognition, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing quietly for months. Maria felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with friendship or gratitude. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if you hadn't answered that advertisement," Eleanor said quietly. "Lonely," Maria answered without thinking. "It would have been lonely." Friday morning brought a break in the storm, though the snow was still falling lightly and the temperature remained brutal. The men ventured out to assess damage and care for the animals, while Maria and Eleanor worked together to prepare a celebratory breakfast for everyone who had weathered the crisis. As Maria cooked and Eleanor helped serve, Maria found herself hyper-aware of every interaction between them. The way Eleanor's hand brushed hers when passing plates, the way Eleanor anticipated her needs in the kitchen without being asked, the way Eleanor's eyes followed Sophia with such tenderness and love. It was while watching Eleanor play with Sophia after breakfast that the realization hit Maria with stunning clarity. She was in love with Eleanor Hartwell. Not just grateful to her, not just fond of her, but truly, deeply in love with this remarkable woman who had given them a home and become such an integral part of their lives. The knowledge should have terrified her. In the world she came from, such feelings between women were forbidden, dangerous, something to be hidden and denied. But sitting in the warm kitchen of Silver Creek Ranch, watching Eleanor make Sophia laugh with silly faces, Maria felt only rightness. This woman had become her partner in caring for Sophia, her companion in the daily rhythms of life, her closest friend and confidant. Sophia took several wobbly steps from Maria's chair to Eleanor's. Squealing with delight at her own accomplishment, Eleanor scooped her up with joy, spinning her around while Sophia giggled. "Did you see that?" Eleanor called to Maria. "She walked. Really walked, not just cruising." Maria watched them celebrate together, Eleanor's face bright with pride and love for Sophia, and her heart felt so full it might burst. This was what family looked like. Not the traditional arrangement she had grown up expecting, but something better. Something chosen and cherished and built through shared experience and mutual care. "She's been practicing when she thinks no one is watching," Maria said, moving closer to join their celebration. "I think she was waiting for the right moment to show off." Eleanor hugged Sophia close, breathing in the baby's sweet scent. "Smart girl. She knows how to make a moment special." As Sophia babbled happily in Eleanor's arms, Maria made a decision. She might not be able to speak her feelings aloud, not yet, but she could show them through her actions. She could continue to build this life they were creating together. Day by day, meal by meal, evening by evening. That night, As the storm finally began to clear and stars appeared through the breaking clouds, they resumed their evening routine on the porch. They bundled up against the cold, Eleanor bringing extra blankets to keep them warm. Sophia nursed contentedly in Maria's arms before drifting off to sleep, while Eleanor read aloud from a book of poetry she had brought from the house. "Listen to this one," Eleanor said, her voice soft in the cold air. "It's about finding home in unexpected places." As Eleanor read the poem about travelers finding shelter and comfort in strangers' kindness, Maria felt tears prick her eyes. The words seemed to perfectly capture her own journey from desperate flight to this moment of peace and belonging. "That's beautiful," Maria whispered when Eleanor finished. "It reminds me of you," Eleanor said quietly. "Coming here with Sophia, making this place feel like home again." They sat in silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts while Sophia slept peacefully between them. The storm had passed, leaving the world covered in pristine white snow that sparkled under the starlight. The ranch looked transformed, beautiful and serene in its winter coat. Maria knew that something fundamental had shifted during those 3 days of storm. The crisis had stripped away pretenses and revealed the truth of their relationship. They were no longer employer and employee, no longer two women sharing a house out of convenience. They were partners caring for each other and for Sophia, with a love that went deeper than friendship. As they prepared to go inside, Eleanor helped Maria bundle the sleeping Sophia in warm blankets. Their hands touched as they adjusted the baby's coverings, and neither of them pulled away. The contact was brief but electric, full of unspoken recognition. "Good night, Maria," Eleanor said softly as they reached the top of the stairs. "Good night," Maria replied, her voice catching slightly on the words. Later, lying in her comfortable bed in the main house with Sophia sleeping peacefully in the next room, Maria stared at the ceiling and tried to process the magnitude of her realization. She was in love with Eleanor Hartwell, and despite the complications that brought, she had never felt happier or more complete in her life. Outside, the Montana wind had finally died down, leaving the ranch wrapped in the profound silence that follows a storm. Spring arrived at Silver Creek Ranch with a vengeance, bringing warm sunshine that melted the snow so quickly, it created muddy rivers everywhere. Sophia had celebrated her first birthday in March with a small party in the kitchen, delighting everyone by taking confident steps around the room while babbling what sounded remarkably like Mama and Ella, her version of Eleanor's name. The winter months had been peaceful and productive. Maria and Eleanor had settled into their shared household with an ease that felt natural and right. They took turns reading bedtime stories to Sophia, shared cooking duties when Eleanor felt inspired to help, and spent long evenings by the fireplace talking about everything from ranch business to dreams for the future. Maria had grown more confident in her English, partly due to Eleanor's patient teaching and partly from necessity. Eleanor had begun including her in more ranch decisions, seeking her input on everything from menu planning for the busy summer season to budgeting for kitchen improvements. The line between employee and partner had blurred beyond recognition. The ranch hands had long since accepted the unusual arrangement. To them, Maria was part of the ranch family, and Sophia was their shared mascot. Eleanor seemed happier than she had been since her husband's death, and that was all that mattered to the men who had worked for the family for years, but their peaceful existence was about to be tested in ways none of them anticipated. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning in early April, driving up to the ranch in an expensive car that looked out of place among the pickup trucks and work vehicles. Maria was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard unfamiliar voices on the front porch. Through the window, she could see Eleanor talking to a tall man in a suit, their conversation growing increasingly animated. Sophia was napping upstairs, and Maria found herself straining to hear what was being discussed. The man's voice carried an air of authority and displeasure that made her stomach tighten with worry. She had learned to trust her instincts about dangerous men, and everything about this visitor set off alarm bells. When Eleanor finally brought the man into the kitchen for coffee, Maria could see the tension in her posture. Eleanor's usual calm demeanor was strained, and her hands shook slightly as she poured coffee for their unwelcome guest. "Maria, this is my late husband's brother, Richard Hartwell," Eleanor said with forced politeness. "Richard, this is Maria Gonzalez, our cook and housekeeper." Richard looked Maria up and down with obvious disapproval, taking in her simple work clothes and the baby toys scattered around the kitchen. I see you've made some interesting staffing decisions, Eleanor. Maria is excellent at her job, Eleanor replied firmly. The men are well fed and the house is well managed. I'm sure she is, Richard said in a tone that suggested anything but approval. Though I have to wonder if this arrangement is entirely appropriate for a woman in your position. Maria felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger. She had encountered this kind of prejudice before. The assumption that because she was Mexican and worked in a kitchen, she was somehow beneath consideration as a real person. But hearing it directed at her in what had become her home, in front of Eleanor, made it sting even more. What exactly do you mean by that? Eleanor asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Richard gestured vaguely around the kitchen. A young Mexican woman living in your house, her child running around like family. People talk, Eleanor. It reflects poorly on the ranch's reputation. Eleanor stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I think this conversation is over, Richard. I'm afraid it's not, Richard replied, remaining seated. I've been patient with your grief, Eleanor, but it's time to face reality. Frank left me as executor of his estate for a reason. He knew you'd need guidance in managing the ranch properly. Maria saw Eleanor's face go pale. Frank left the ranch to me. The will was very clear about that. The ranch, yes, but not complete control over its operations. As executor, I have certain responsibilities to ensure the property is managed according to Frank's wishes. Richard pulled a folder from his briefcase. Frank built this ranch to be a respectable operation. He wouldn't have approved of the current arrangements. Maria felt like she was watching a nightmare unfold. She didn't fully understand the legal implications of what Richard was saying, but she could see the devastation on Eleanor's face. This man was threatening everything they had built together. I think you should leave, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. I'll leave for now, Richard agreed, standing and adjusting his suit jacket. But I'll be back next week with some paperwork that needs to be addressed. We need to discuss the ranch's staffing and housing arrangements, among other things. After Richard left, Eleanor sank into her chair, as if all the strength had left her body. Maria wanted to go to her to offer comfort, but she wasn't sure what was appropriate given the accusations that had just been made. What does he want? Maria asked quietly. Eleanor rubbed her temples, looking older than Maria had ever seen her. Control. He's always resented that Frank left the ranch to me instead of him. He's been looking for an excuse to challenge the will or force me to make changes he approves of. What kind of changes? Eleanor met her eyes with a look of pain and regret. He wants me to fire you. He thinks having you and Sophia living in the house is inappropriate and reflects poorly on the ranch's reputation. Maria felt her world start to crumble. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should move back to the cook's quarters or find another job. No, Eleanor said fiercely. Absolutely not. This is your home. Sophia's home. Richard doesn't get to dictate how I run my own household. But even as Eleanor spoke with determination, Maria could see the worry in her eyes. Richard had clearly rattled her with his legal threats and talk of estate management. The confidence Eleanor had shown all winter was shaken. Over the next few days, Eleanor spent hours on the phone with lawyers and reading through legal documents. The easy rhythm of their life was disrupted by constant stress and worry. Sophia sensed the tension, becoming fussier and more clingy than usual. The situation became more complicated when Carlos, one of the younger ranch hands, approached Maria while she was hanging laundry behind the house. I heard about the trouble with Mr. Hartwell's brother, he said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. I want you to know that all of us men think it's wrong. You belong here. Maria thanked him for his support, but Carlos didn't leave. Instead, he shifted nervously from foot to foot, clearly working up to something else. Maria, I've been thinking, he said finally. If things get difficult for you here, if you need a different kind of security, I've been wanting to ask you to marry me. Maria stared at him in shock. Carlos was a good man, hardworking and kind, but the proposal came completely out of nowhere. You're a wonderful woman, and Sophia needs a father, Carlos continued, misinterpreting her silence as consideration. I know I'm not rich, but I have some savings. We could get a little place in town, and you wouldn't have to worry about anyone questioning your situation. Carlos, Maria began gently. I'm honored that you would ask, but you don't have to answer right away, he said quickly. Just think about it. Marriage would give you legal protection that you don't have now. No one could question your right to be here if you were my wife. That evening, as Maria and Eleanor sat on the porch watching Sophia play in the grass, Maria told her about Carlos's proposal. Eleanor's reaction was immediate and strong. You're not seriously considering it, are you? Eleanor asked, her voice tight with something that might have been jealousy. It would solve some problems, Maria said carefully. Carlos is a good man and he's right that marriage would give me legal protection. And what about Sophia? What about the life we've built here? Maria looked at Eleanor, seeing the pain in her eyes. What about it? Richard made it clear that he doesn't approve of our arrangement. Maybe it would be better for everyone if I married Carlos and moved away. Better for everyone except you and Sophia and me, Eleanor said quietly. They sat in silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts. Sophia babbled happily to herself, oblivious to the adult complications swirling around her. The peaceful evening felt fragile, like something precious that was about to be broken. Later that night, after Sophia was asleep, Eleanor knocked softly on Maria's bedroom door. When Maria opened it, she found Eleanor standing in the hallway in her nightgown, her eyes red from crying. I can't bear the thought of losing you and Sophia, Eleanor said without preamble. I know I don't have the right to ask you to stay, especially when marriage to Carlos might give you the security you need. But the thought of you leaving, of this house being empty again. Maria stepped aside to let Eleanor into the room. They sat on the edge of the bed, both struggling with emotions they couldn't fully express. I don't want to leave, Maria admitted. This is home. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. What? Eleanor prompted gently. Maria took a breath, gathering courage. You're more than my employer, more than my friend. You're the person I want to share Sophia's milestones with, the person I want to talk to at the end of every day. I don't know what that makes us, but I know I don't want to lose it. Eleanor reached for Maria's hand, intertwining their fingers. The immigration officials arrived at Silver Creek Ranch on a Thursday morning in late April, their government vehicles kicking up dust as they drove up the long dirt road. Maria was in the kitchen when she saw them through the window, and her blood turned to ice. She had lived with this fear for over a year, the constant worry that someday her past would catch up with her. Sophia was playing on the kitchen floor, now walking confidently and chattering in her mixture of English and Spanish words. At 13 months old, she was a bright, happy toddler who knew no fear of the world around her. Looking at her daughter's innocent face, Maria felt sick with terror. Eleanor appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face grim. There are 3 men here asking about you. They say they're from Immigration Services. Maria's hand shook as she wiped them on her apron. Richard called them, didn't he? I assume so. But Maria, listen to me carefully. You don't have to talk to them without a lawyer present. You have rights. What rights? Maria asked bitterly. I'm here illegally with a baby. They can send us back today if they want to. Eleanor's jaw tightened with determination. Not if I have anything to say about it. The lead official, a stern-faced man in his 50s, knocked on the kitchen door and entered without waiting for permission. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Agent Patterson with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to speak with Maria Gonzalez regarding her immigration status. Eleanor stepped protectively closer to Maria and Sophia. What seems to be the problem, Agent Patterson? We received a report that you're employing an undocumented worker and housing her illegally on your property. We need to verify Miss Gonzalez's immigration status and determine if any violations have occurred. Maria felt like she might faint. This was the nightmare she had lived with every day since arriving in America. She picked up Sophia, holding her daughter close as if she could somehow protect her from what was about to happen. I'd like to see the report you're referring to, Eleanor said calmly. Though Maria could see the tension in her posture, Agent Patterson pulled out a folder. We received an anonymous tip that you're harboring an illegal immigrant with a child. The caller expressed concern about the welfare of the child and the appropriateness of the living arrangements. Anonymous, Eleanor repeated. How convenient. The agent looked around the kitchen, taking note of Sophia's toys and high chair, the family photos that now included pictures of all 3 of them together. Miss Gonzalez, we need to see your documentation proving your legal status in the United States. Maria's mouth went dry. I don't have papers. Then I'm afraid we'll need you to come with us for processing. Arrangements will be made for the child through social services. No, Maria gasped, clutching Sophia tighter. Please don't take her away from me. Sophia began to cry, sensing her mother's distress. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. Agent Patterson, before you do anything hasty, I think there's been a misunderstanding about Miss Gonzalez's status here. The agent looked at her skeptically. What kind of misunderstanding? Eleanor took a deep breath, and Maria could see her making a crucial decision. Maria isn't just an employee. She's my business partner in legal ward. I've been sponsoring her immigration status through my lawyers. Maria stared at Eleanor in shock. This wasn't true, but Eleanor was speaking with such conviction that even Maria almost believed her. I'll need to see documentation of this sponsorship, Agent Patterson said. Of course. My lawyers are handling the paperwork. It's been in process for several months now. Eleanor moved to the kitchen desk and pulled out a business card. You can contact my attorney, James Morrison, in town. He'll confirm that all the proper applications have been filed. The agent examined the card while his colleagues looked around the kitchen and living areas. Maria held her breath, praying that Eleanor's bluff would work. This is highly irregular, Mrs. Hartwell. Usually sponsors notify us directly when housing potential immigrants during the application process. I apologize for any confusion, Eleanor said smoothly. As you can imagine, managing a ranch this size while dealing with immigration paperwork has been challenging. I assumed my lawyer was handling all the proper notifications. Agent Patterson conferred quietly with his colleagues before turning back to Eleanor. We'll need to verify this information with your attorney and our records. In the meantime, Miss Gonzalez will need to remain available for questioning. Of course, Eleanor replied. She'll be right here at the ranch. After the agents left, promising to return within a few days, Maria sank into a kitchen chair, still holding Sophia. The toddler had stopped crying but remained clingy, sensing the lingering tension in the room. Eleanor, what have you done? Maria whispered. You lied to federal agents. You could get in serious trouble. Eleanor knelt beside Maria's chair, taking both her hands. I bought us time. Now we need to make it true. How can we make it true? I don't have legal status. I can't just become your business partner overnight. Yes, you can. Eleanor's voice was steady and determined. I've been thinking about this since Richard's visit. You've been running this kitchen, managing meals for a dozen men, planning menus and budgets. You're already my partner in everything but name. Maria shook her head. Immigration doesn't work that way. You can't just declare someone your partner and make them legal. Actually, I can. Eleanor stood and began pacing the kitchen. There are provisions for business partnerships and sponsorship programs. It's complicated, but it's possible, especially if I can demonstrate that you're essential to the ranch's operations. Sophia wiggled down from Maria's lap and toddled over to her toy box, apparently deciding the crisis was over. Maria watched her daughter play, thinking about the choice Eleanor was offering. Why would you do this? Maria asked quietly. You're risking everything. Your ranch, your reputation, your freedom. If they find out you lied. Eleanor stopped pacing and looked directly at Maria. Because I love you. Because Sophia is like my own daughter. Because this family we've created is the most important thing in my life. Maria felt tears well up in her eyes. Eleanor, I know it's complicated. I know we're two women trying to build a life together in a world that doesn't understand or accept what we have. But we can make this work legally. We can protect Sophia and create a legitimate business partnership that gives you legal status. And what about us? What about what we mean to each other? Eleanor sat back down, taking Maria's hands again. That stays between us. Publicly, we're business partners. Privately, we're whatever we choose to be. Over the next 3 days, Eleanor worked frantically with her lawyer to create a paper trail that would support their story. James Morrison, a longtime family attorney who had handled Eleanor's husband's estate, was initially skeptical but eventually agreed to help. It's legally possible, he told them during a tense meeting in his office, but it requires demonstrating that Maria is essential to the ranch's profitability, and that the partnership serves a legitimate business purpose. Eleanor had come prepared with documentation of Maria's contributions to the ranch, financial records showing improved efficiency and cost savings in food services, testimonials from the ranch hands about improved morale and retention, even photographs of meals and kitchen improvements that demonstrated Maria's professional capabilities. She's not just a cook, Eleanor insisted. She's transformed our entire food service operation. The men are happier, more productive. We've saved money on food costs while improving quality. She's an essential part of the ranch's success. Maria sat quietly through most of the meeting, overwhelmed by Eleanor's passionate defense of her contributions. She had never thought of herself as essential to anything beyond Sophia's care. But Eleanor was making a compelling case for her value as a business partner. The partnership structure could work, Morrison concluded. But you need to understand that this puts you both under scrutiny. Any hint that this is a sham arrangement to circumvent immigration law could result in serious consequences. When the immigration agents returned on Monday, they found a very different situation than they had expected. Morrison met them at the ranch with a folder full of documentation supporting Maria's status as Eleanor's business partner and immigration sponsor. Agent Patterson reviewed the paperwork with obvious skepticism but couldn't find any obvious flaws. The business partnership documents were legitimate, filed with the appropriate state agencies. The immigration sponsorship application had been rushed through Morrison's connections and was properly submitted. This is all very convenient timing, the agent observed. Business partnerships often develop organically, Morrison replied smoothly. Mrs. Hartwell recognized Miss Gonzalez's talents and formalized an arrangement that was already functioning in practice. The agents interviewed Maria extensively, asking detailed questions about her role at the ranch and her relationship with Eleanor. Maria answered honestly about her work responsibilities, while carefully avoiding any mention of their personal relationship. Sophia, meanwhile, charmed everyone by toddling around the kitchen, calling Eleanor Ella and clearly comfortable in what was obviously her home. The agents couldn't deny that this was a child who belonged here, cared for by two women who obviously loved her. 2 years later, Silver Creek Ranch had transformed into something nobody could have imagined when Maria first arrived with baby Sophia in her arms. The ranch still operated as a working cattle operation, but it had also become home to Abuela's Kitchen, a restaurant that drew visitors from 3 counties away to taste Maria's authentic Mexican cuisine and hearty ranch cooking. Sophia, now 3 years old, was a confident bilingual chatterbox who considered herself the unofficial greeter for restaurant guests. She would toddle up to arriving cars, introduce herself in both English and Spanish, and lead families to their tables with the authority of someone who knew she belonged exactly where she was. "Bienvenidos to Abuela's Kitchen," she would announce using the phrase Maria had taught her. "My Mama Maria makes the best food and my Mama Eleanor has the best horses." The restaurant had been Eleanor's idea, born from watching how much the neighboring ranchers enjoyed Maria's cooking during community gatherings. "We're sitting on a gold mine," Eleanor had said one evening as they watched another group of visitors reluctantly leave after a ranch barbecue. "People drive hours for food this good in the city. Why not bring the city to us?" They had converted the old barn into a warm, welcoming dining space with rustic wooden tables and family photographs covering the walls. Maria's grandmother's recipes formed the heart of the menu, alongside ranch favorites that could satisfy the heartiest appetites. The restaurant operated Friday through Sunday, serving dinner on Friday and Saturday nights, and their famous Sunday brunch that often required reservations weeks in advance. The business partnership that had started as a legal necessity had evolved into a genuine collaboration that played to both women's strengths. Maria managed all aspects of food preparation and kitchen operations, while Eleanor handled the business side, customer service, and marketing. They had hired additional kitchen staff and servers, creating jobs for several families in the area. Maria's legal status had been fully resolved the previous year, with her permanent residency approved, based on her essential role in the ranch's operations. She was now on track for citizenship, something that still amazed her when she thought about the frightened woman who had arrived at Silver Creek Ranch with nothing but hope and determination. The main house had been modified to accommodate their growing family and business needs. Sophia had her own bedroom decorated with horses and stars, reflecting her dual love of ranch life and bedtime stories. Eleanor and Maria each maintained separate bedrooms for appearances, but everyone who mattered knew that they were partners in every sense of the word. Their relationship had deepened over the years into something solid and enduring. They worked together seamlessly, raised Sophia as a team, and found joy in the daily rhythms of ranch and restaurant life. While they couldn't be publicly affectionate in the way married couples could, their love showed in countless small ways. The way Eleanor's eyes followed Maria around the kitchen, how Maria always made sure Eleanor's favorite coffee was ready first thing in the morning, the way they shared quiet smiles over Sophia's head when she said something particularly amusing. The ranch hands, now expanded to include several year-round employees plus seasonal help, had long since accepted their unconventional family structure. Tom, now in his 70s but still working, had appointed himself Sophia's honorary grandfather, teaching her to ride and whittling toys that she treasured. The newer employees quickly learned that Sophia had two mothers who were equally protective and loving, and that questioning the arrangement was the fastest way to find employment elsewhere. Carlos had married a schoolteacher from town the previous fall, and often brought his new wife, Patricia, to Sunday brunch. Patricia had become a good friend to both Maria and Eleanor, and Sophia adored having another Tia to play with. "You three have created something special here," Patricia had told Maria one Sunday afternoon as they watched Sophia show off her riding skills to a group of restaurant guests. "Sophia is so confident and happy. She knows she's loved." The community had embraced Abuela's kitchen enthusiastically. Local families came for special occasions, and word of mouth had brought visitors from as far as Billings and Great Falls. Food critics from regional magazines had written glowing reviews, praising both the authentic flavors and the warm, family atmosphere. "The secret ingredient is love," one reviewer had written. "You can taste it in every dish and feel it in the genuine warmth of the service. This isn't just a restaurant. It's a celebration of family and community." Richard Hartwell had made one final attempt to cause trouble, spreading rumors in town about inappropriate arrangements and moral corruption. But his efforts had backfired spectacularly when the community rallied around Maria and Eleanor. Local church leaders, business owners, and ranch families had publicly defended them, pointing to their contributions to the community and the obvious love and care they showed Sophia. "Those two women work harder than anyone I know," the bank president had declared at a town meeting. "They've created jobs, brought visitors to our area, and raised a wonderful child. If Richard Hartwell doesn't like it, he can take his business elsewhere." Richard had indeed taken his business elsewhere, selling his own small ranch and moving to Arizona, where he could complain about moral standards to people who didn't know better. On this particular evening in late summer, as the sun set behind the mountains in a blaze of orange and purple, Maria and Eleanor sat on their porch watching Sophia play with a new litter of barn kittens. The restaurant had closed for the day after a busy Sunday brunch. The staff had gone home, and the ranch was settling into its peaceful evening rhythm. Sophia, now tall enough to climb into her own chair, settled between her two mothers with a book about horses that Eleanor had brought her from town. "Read to me, Mama Eleanor," Sophia requested, using the formal name she had adopted to distinguish between her mothers when she needed something specific from one of them. As Eleanor read the story, Maria reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 years ago, she had been a desperate young mother with no money, no legal status, and no future beyond the hope of finding safety for her child. Now she was a successful business owner, a legal resident on the path to citizenship, and part of a family that had been built on love rather than traditional expectations. Sophia had thrived in their unconventional household, growing into a confident child who spoke 2 languages fluently and seemed equally comfortable helping in the restaurant kitchen or riding horses with the ranch hands. She had never known a world where having 2 mothers was unusual, and her easy acceptance of their family structure had helped others in the community do the same. "Mama Maria," Sophia said suddenly, interrupting Eleanor's reading. "Are we going to live here forever?" Maria exchanged a smile with Eleanor over Sophia's head. "Would you like to live here forever?" "Yes. I want to help with the restaurant when I'm bigger, and I want to learn to train horses like Mama Eleanor, and I want to cook like you, and I want to take care of the baby cows." "Well then," Eleanor said, closing the book and pulling Sophia onto her lap. "I think we can arrange for you to stay as long as you want. Promise?" Sophia asked seriously. "Promise," both women said together. Later that night, after Sophia was asleep and the ranch was quiet, Maria and Eleanor walked through their restaurant space, planning improvements for the following season. They had talked about expanding the dining area and maybe adding a gift shop featuring local crafts and Maria's homemade salsas and preserves. "Can you believe this is our life?" Maria asked, straightening chairs and wiping down tables with the automatic efficiency of someone who took pride in her work. Sometimes I wake up and think I'm dreaming, Eleanor admitted. 3 years ago, I was a widow rattling around in an empty house, barely managing to keep the ranch running. Now look at this place. They stood in the dining room, surrounded by evidence of their success. Framed newspaper reviews on the walls, a reservation book filled with bookings for the coming months, and family photographs that showed the three of them at various ranch and restaurant events. "We did this together," Maria said, taking Eleanor's hand. "All of it." Eleanor squeezed her fingers gently. "The best decisions I ever made were hiring you as a cook and then refusing to let you be anything less than my partner." As they walked back toward the main house under a sky brilliant with stars, Maria thought about the future they were building together. Sophia would grow up here, probably go to college somewhere far away, and hopefully return to carry on whatever version of the family business made sense in her generation. There would be challenges ahead, there always were, but they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. The house was quiet as they checked on Sophia, who was sleeping peacefully surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books. Her room was decorated with artwork she had created, photographs of her various adventures around the ranch, and a growth chart on the wall that marked how she was literally growing up in this place that had become home to all of them. "She's going to be tall like her mama Eleanor," Maria whispered, noting Sophia's latest measurement. "And stubborn like her mama Maria," Eleanor replied with a soft laugh.